What's going on, guys? It is absolutely miserably brutal outside today. Could hardly spend any time on the water. Couldn't do a video. So in the name of content, wanted to give you guys something to chew on here today. So we're gonna do YouTube comments. I know we're getting to that point where why not read some comments? Never really a great idea, but I think my channel is unique in the way that it's hardcore focused on information, just like I want it to be. So because of that, we get a lot of great questions pertaining to fishing, walleye fishing, sonar. The kind of focus on my channel for the most part is walleye fishing, although I fish for a little bit of everything. We do have a lot of good questions on here. So I kind of picked some of the unique ones, some of the common ones, stuff like that. And hopefully your question gets answered, and feel free to drop a whole bunch more questions. Let me know if you guys like this kind of video, hate this kind of video. I'm sorry there's no fish catches in this video, but very soon we will get to more fish catching videos and very informative fish catching videos. So first question, Mark Span. This is a good question for a couple of reasons. This question's been asked many times, but Mark asks, when you find fish, how long do you stay with a certain presentation before you change? Now, this is kind of comes back to the old, do you go look for more fish? Have you already found fish? Stuff like that, right? Well, kind of like what I'm doing right now. I'm fishing a shallow water weed bite for walleyes. That presentation is going to be fished one of two ways because there's not really a lot of different presentations you can use. Let's say you're fishing a big 10-foot flat. A really big 10-foot flat for walleyes. Well, that would open up your options as far as what kind of baits you could use. You could troll it, you could cast it, you could cast a plastic, you could troll a live bait, you could troll a crankbait. So there's a lot of different things you could do in a situation like that. Now, a situation I'm fishing right now, most of the time on my lakes up here, I'm fishing a lot of walleyes related to very close corners weed edges. These aren't weed edges where like it's 200 or 300 yards long and there's walleyes through the whole thing. I'm fishing for very small pockets of fish right next to very thick weeds. So in this situation, I'm not going through a lot of presentations trying to catch these fish. This is basically a jig presentation. I'm either gonna jig these fish with a minnow, or if they want something snappier, I might jig it with a plastic. So like, let's say I find these fish and I make, I find right where the school is and I make 10 casts at them without getting a bite. I'm not gonna change presentations to try to get fish to bite there. I'm just gonna go find another pod of fish that might be more hungry. So a lot of times what'll happen is we might pull up on a pod and we might not catch any. Pull up on the next one, we might get one. Pull up on the next one, we might get 5. This is kind of how these bites work a lot of times. Sometimes, one school of fish will be more fired up than another. So, it all kind of depends on how you're seeing fish, how big the area is, how many different presentations work in that same area. Like if it was like, let's say the first example, where there's a big 10-foot flat and there's walleyes kind of scattered throughout, this would be the the situation where if I'm finding fish and I can stay on them, I might try a whole bunch of stuff. I might try casting something snappy. I might try trolling a live bait, and then I might try trolling a crank, or some kind of order like that. So it all kind of depends on how those fish are set up and what you can do in that area. So hopefully that was a decent answer. For the most part, if I know what the fish are eating, I'm not gonna spend an hour on a spot casting for the same fish to pick up a fish every 10 or 15 minutes. I always like to think that I'm fishing for the pattern that's gonna catch me a lot of fish in a day versus kind of the pattern that's just gonna catch a few. So there's a lot of times throughout every day when I'm out walleye fishing where I leave big schools of fish to go fish for other fish. So, hopefully that was a little bit of insight and kind of, how my mind works or what I would do if I was on the water. So next question, Ben Rollins. Snap jigging, this was on the snap jigging shallow for fall walleyes video I did probably a week ago. Does this technique work in stained or turbid water? He says that I always seem to be on clear water lakes. Well, first of all, the whole clear water thing is a question I get asked a ton. I would love to go fish like the Mississippi River. I would love to go fish Winnebago and stuff like this. The honest answer is that I just don't have the time. The best walleye lakes in my area, and for the most part I would say northern Wisconsin, are these deeper clear lakes. These deeper clear lakes tend to get far less pressure than a lot of the stain systems, and I'm not sure why that is. I think darker water, guys generally think shallower and easier fish, and there's a lot of misconceptions about clear water, like you gotta fish early in the morning or late in the day. It's gotta be cloudy out, stuff like that. None of those are true at all, but the best lakes in my area are deep clear lakes. All I hear is talk about Chippewa flowage is like the most historic body of water in northern Wisconsin. I try to stay away from there 100% if I'm walleye fishing, just because the walleye fishing everywhere else is so much better. Now, on to the snap jigging question. Snap jigging is not an only clear water thing. Back when I used to fish the flowage a fair amount, I would do a lot of snap jigging. Now, if I'm fishing very dirty water, it's not necessarily a speed thing. So instead of doing that boom, crack, boom, crack, boom, crack, one thing I might do is just kind of a quicker lift versus that real hard snap I do a lot of times. And clear water is kind of notorious for being a very much reaction type of lake, where you're trying to trigger fish to bite. Where a lot of times these more stained bodies of water, instead of fishing like a split tail minnow, I might put on a 3.5-inch ripple shad, or something that has a big, hard hitting swim bait tail, something that puts out a lot of vibration. And I might just kind of do a fast pickup as opposed to that real hard snap, just to get that going around. But snap jigging works everywhere. We use it in 32-degree water in Green Bay in the spring, and it catches fish. So it's basically, the difference is what is snap jigging? Is snap jigging just the boom, boom that I do every time, or is snap jigging a quick pickup? Is it letting the bait hit the bottom and a quick pickup? There's a whole bunch of different ways you can snap jig. Snap jigging with a jig and a plastic works everywhere walleyes live. And in a lot of places it probably works all season long, spring, summer, and fall. So yes, it works everywhere. You might have to kind of change how you're doing it, change the specifics of it depending on the body of water you're on. But it does work everywhere, and it's something that I don't see a lot of guys do, especially up here in northern Wisconsin on a lot of our lakes that tend to be fished fairly old school. All right, next question. Darren says, I seem to catch a lot of small fish with the jigging wrap. Is this a small fish lure? The jigging wrap is an all fish lure. There will never be a bait, as long as I'm alive probably, that is more powerful than that class of lures. The whole jigging wrap, Acme hyper rattle, shiver minnow, these baits catch fish everywhere. Spring, summer, and fall, same deal. Same, just like I said about snap jigging, the specifics might change, but they're an extremely powerful lure. Now, a couple of unique things you see with the jigging wrap. One, right when you drop down, you tend to catch the biggest fish in that school, or at least that's what kind of generally seems to happen the most with me. You drop that thing down, it's shooting around. The other weird part about the jigging wrap is it profiles very small. There's not the biggest shiver minnow is probably the biggest lure in that category that fish like this. And I don't think any really, whether it's the hyper rattle or the jigging wrap or the shiver minnow, tends to catch bigger fish on average. But overall, this class of lures is a very small profile in comparison to some of our best big walleye lures, maybe a 4-inch swim bait. Maybe a big Smithwick Rogue 10 or whatever, real big profiling stuff. The interesting part about jigging wrap or this class of lures is how small they are and how it's all speed oriented, it seems like. It almost seems like these fish are so fooled by the speed of this that there is no time for a thought process to happen. I would say a lot of times, especially in summer, something that moves quick like this jigging wrap or hyper rattle catches way more fish than just a standard jig, which is very interesting too. And the other thing, which is always kind of an interesting thought, is that it still comes down to you have to fool a fish or trick a fish into eating something that's not a real bait, right? And I always think about this with musky fishing. A lot of times I think it's easier to fool a fish with a smaller bait than it is a bigger bait. If that fish, just because they can't pick it up quite as clear. If a jigging wrap was this big, would it catch as many fish? I don't know. But it's always something I think about, that if you can get big fish to eat a small bait, it's easier to fool them into biting. So something to think about there. But no, the jigging wrap catches a ton of fish of all sizes. It's probably the most innovative lure that we will ever fish in our times. That whole class of lures, whether you're fishing the Acme hyper rattle, the shiver minnow, or the jigging wrap. So it's a great lure. Next question, and this is one we have a lot, especially in our summer trolling videos, and I'll kind of open it up to a bunch of other stuff, but I do a lot of spinner rig trolling in the summer, and one question we always get is, how do you get the bottom bouncer to the desired depth? Well, there's a couple different ways to do it with bottom bouncers. The way I do it is with a line counter reel. I troll all line counter reels. And whether you're trolling 1 ounce bottom bouncers, 3/4 ounce, 2 ounce, 3 ounce, 4 ounce, whatever you're trolling, you can look online and there's a dive curve rated for these different weights of bottom bouncers. Now the same thing goes if you're fishing snap weights. There's basically mainly 3 ways that will troll spinners. One's with a snap weight, and that's where there's just a spinner to a swivel. You let out 50 feet of line or 40 feet of line without any weight on it, and then you snap that snap weight on, generally with an offshore tackle. They're the red clip, I'm not sure what they are, and 1 ounce or 2 ounce or 3 ounce or whatever you're running. So snap weighting is a super easy way to achieve depth. And same thing, you can go online and look up the snap weight dive curve. which should really be the same as a bottom bouncer as long as we're using the same weight. So, you know, basically any lure, any weight, whether it's a snap weight, an inline weight, a bottom bouncer, there is a dive curve for it, especially in walleye fishing in that, you know, 1 ounce to 4 ounce range. That's just pretty common, you know, knowledge basically out there on the internet that you can find. As far as, you know, how we get other stuff down to depth, you know, whether that's cranks, same thing, dive curve for all that stuff. The one thing to remember, I guess, if you're trolling, whether that's a snap weight, whether that's a bottom bouncer, or whether that's an inline weight, is that lead sinks very quickly. It'll also raise very quickly, right? So if you're trolling, like, let's say a 1 ounce weight, and at 1 mile an hour, you know, pulling spinners, at 90 feet back, you're down 25, 26 feet approximately. Well, if you slow down, or if that's your inside rod, that's gonna sink very quick. If that's your outside rod, it's gonna pick up very quick. So the great thing about lead is it's good for achieving depth. The bad thing about lead is because of the resistance, it'll also lift very quick, which is kind of the difference between lead and lead core. You know, lead core is kind of a totally different thing, but doesn't tend to fluctuate quite as much. So on to the next question. So this one is an interesting one, which I always kind of play with in my head. The guy's name is J/C, and I screenshotted it because I wanted to make sure I read the question in its entirety here. All right, here we go. So, Tom, watched one of your videos for the first time this morning. I have to say, in all honesty, it seems like all the fun of fishing is gone. When you can see your bait, and when a fish comes up to bite the bait, he's basically saying that we can see all that, which we could on the crappie video I did. Everyone seems to be in a hurry and find an easy way to get from A to Z. Fishing is learning how to be patient and, more importantly, relax. And then he said, I'm old, so forgive me for not being in tune with fishing of today. I see both ways on this question. I mean, I fish for a job, fish for a living, so most of the time it's hard for me to relax in a boat. But I totally get that as far as, you know, feeling pressured to be catching fish. I totally get that. I wish I could check out of it better. But is all the fun in fishing gone? No. So for me, I love catching fish. I love feeling a bite and sending the hook. I love figure eighting a muskie. I love, you know, trolling for lake trout and watching a rod go out. But more than anything, I like establishing patterns. You know, I like the biggest thrill for fishing for me is the modern wave of technology. I love sitting on a weed line and watching walleyes out the side of me, knowing exactly where I can cast to them. But kind of the next jump to this question, which is when he's talking about it almost seems, you know, like it's getting too easy, is something I always think about. Like, will there ever be a time when, you know, Humminbird will come out with something, well, we'll have to take a step back and be like, this is, you know, this is going to damage the fishing population too much. You know, is this too easy to go out and catch fish now? Can anybody go and do this? And generally when I ask most people this question, I always bring it up quite a bit to buddies or stuff like that. Everybody tends to think that, you know, as we get better at catching them, you know, there's still going to be the general public that's not going to know, you know, how to read this or how to do that. So I think, you know, the fishing industry is going in a direction, you're already seeing a lot of it, where kind of the guys at the top are basically going to have to become teachers of the, you know, the new electronics coming out. And then the next question is, you know, are these fish going to become more pressured to the point where, you know, they have a reaction to us pressuring them? Because I always think about, like, what if every fisherman in Hayward was like me? You know, I'm only one guy, but I put a lot of pressure on these lakes because I'm out there every day. And it would be honestly scary if everybody in Hayward used the same side imaging or was as good at, you know, finding them as I was. You know, I obviously just have more time, which is the luxury I have to catching more fish. But, you know, it'll be interesting to see, you know, what happens, if it'll ever get to a point one day where we'll have to say, like, this is too much. You know, like, this is too easy to go out and find fish. Where you pull up to the boat landing, back the boat in, point the sonar backwards, and it picks up pods of walleyes 200 yards this way or over here, or, you know, whatever it is. It'll be interesting to see where it takes its course. But I do think that, you know, guys at the top of the game are always going to be the guys, especially in the direction fishing is going. They're either going to have to teach this stuff or be very proficient at this stuff. Yeah, it'll just be interesting to see. I mean, it's totally changing right now, and I feel lucky that I kind of started fishing or got into it right when the biggest boom started happening. So, exciting stuff. All right, so next question we have is one that we get all the time too, is I get this on a lot of videos if I'm casting or pitching jigs, or if I'm sleepwater fishing. People are always like, how quickly are you moving your boat when you're doing this stuff? 99% of the time I am spot locked. There's very few times where I am moving along a spot at this point, and there's a reason for that. Fishing inland lakes here in the Hayward area, most of the time I am finding fish before I'm casting to them. So what that means is that I've already located the pot of fish. I know exactly where they are. Most of the time I waypoint them either on a point or a weed edge or a inside turn or whatever it is. And I have a waypoint right where those fish are, and I'm pitching back to them. Now, in the lakes I fish up here, I'm not fishing for schools of fish that are 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 100 fish, all kind of littered across a larger area. Most of the time up here on these inland lakes that I'm fishing, which are 2,000 to 10,000 acres, I'm fishing for a finite, small amount of fish, and I know right where they are. So most of the time doing this, I am 100% spot locked. The only times I'm basically using my trolling motor to move along a spot is in a very shallow water application, or if I somehow get enough fish scattered around kind of a point to go around pitching to them. But I do a ton of like drift fishing in places like Green Bay or like Mille Lacs, these areas that have much larger pieces of structure where fish might be kind of littered throughout. So the main principle with this is, are you finding the fish before you're casting to them? Obviously, if you have not found the fish before you're casting to them, there's one of two things going on. You're gonna work around that spot to find the fish, or you're gonna run side imaging or sonar or down imaging, or however you like to do it, to find the one most unique piece of structure on that spot. Whether you're fishing a big point complex and there's 3 boulders right on the tip, right? We all kind of know that that's probably gonna be the sweet spot. So a lot of times, even in the spring, if I'm fishing depths of less than 7 feet and I can't see the walleyes, I'll just spot lock and cast at the sweet spot of that piece of structure. So I think a lot of guys don't spot lock enough. I think a lot of guys need to get more comfortable finding fish before they fish for them. And kind of one leads to the other. I think the more you spot lock and make the same cast over and over, as long as you know you're casting at fish, you're going to be much better off than essentially working a larger area. Now, trolling's obviously the exception to that. That's a totally different thing. But as far as a casting or slip bobber approach, 99% of the time I'm spot lock casting the fish that I already know are there. So the other question I have, which we'll have to do a video one of these days. I did a little bit of one this spring, but I want to do one again this fall as kind of like a wrap up, is what boat do I run? I get this question in almost every video. I think it's been included in a video or a couple other videos or whatever, but I run an Alumacraft 185 competitor tiller. I absolutely love the layout of these boats. That was the first thing I fell in love with. They're a very simple layout. They have a lot of deck for their size. They're very wide for their size. I think the beams are like 98 or 96, and they're all room. They're all room and they're all storage. So it's really easy to have 3 guys in the boat and everybody standing up on the deck casting the same way. It's really easy to have 4 people in the boat and guys are fishing vertical. There's a ton of room in this boat for how big it is. I've had this boat everywhere from Green Bay, Sturgeon Bay area to Lake Superior, and then a ton of little bodies of water all around northern Wisconsin and northern Minnesota. The boat handle's awesome for what it is. If you're looking to get into a multi-species boat, I can't think of a better boat in that class to get into. I absolutely love the Alumacrafts, their layout, everything there is to like about them, and I would absolutely buy another one. So hopefully you guys like this video. It was just a few questions to fill some airtime. I probably went way longer than I thought I would. But if you have some more questions to ask and want to see more of these videos, drop a whole bunch of comments on this video down in the comment section, and maybe we'll do another one of these. So thank you guys for watching. If you guys have not yet, please subscribe. We're gonna do the Piscifun Reel giveaway in a future video sometime here in the near future. But thanks for watching. You guys have a good night. We'll see you next time.